Hello and welcome to another episode of Transcontinental Overload. I wonder how many people have started this year with big plans. Plans of moving to a new country, for a new job, for love, or maybe just for a new adventure. Maybe there are people who had planned a move last year, but were stopped in their tracks by the pandemic. Or maybe they had planned to move, but then decided not to, because this whole situation has had such a huge impact and they decided they didn't want to risk it or didn't want to be so far away from family and friends. And then there'll be others who have decided to come back home, to repatriate because of the pandemic. I have to say that we've spent a lot of time this year contemplating the pros and cons of where we are and whether we should stay or leave or where we want to be in future. This whole crisis has definitely changed our view on a lot of things. Those who have decided to move will really appreciate today's episode and all the thoughts, reflections and advice, and basically the whole story that today's guest is sharing with us. I'm talking to David McNeill, founder of Expat Empire, a company that specializes in inspiring people to move abroad and then helping them do it, with a range of personalized consulting services. David started Expat Empire because he has a genuine passion for living abroad, and he feels that he really wanted to help others achieve their international dreams. Born and raised in the United States, he left his home country in 2014. And since then, he's lived in Tokyo, Berlin, and is now based in Porto, Portugal. He's written a couple of books and also has a blog and podcast. And of course, as ever, I've added all the links in the show notes. In today's world, we are expected to be more mobile and open to other countries, but we don't always realize how challenging moving can be, emotionally, mentally, and also financially. There is definitely more awareness of that these days, which means that there is also more awareness of using a personalized service that can help with the whole process. I absolutely love that there are so many more people offering this kind of service now, and if you are thinking of moving, I would definitely recommend checking out Expat Empire. So let's hear David's story and find out how his own journey has shaped him and inspired him to create his business. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Super happy to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for getting in touch. It sounds like our paths crossed at some point with you having spent time in both California and Austin. So
yeah,
that's exciting.
Exactly. It's funny I'm sure we'll get into maybe some different perspectives. And I love listening to your introduction episode and just getting a taste of it.
Yeah, it's, I never thought when, if someone had told me 10 years ago we moved to the US, just over 10 years ago. If someone had said in 10 years time you're going to be living in Texas, I would have just laughed. But yeah, life is full of surprises.
Definitely.
And decisions are made at different stages that you never thought were possible. And it sounds like your life has brought you to many places. And
yes,
why don't we start there? As we can hear, you're American.
Mm-hmm.
And you are currently in Portugal.
Right.
How did you end up in Porto?
Yes, that is a very complex, long-winded, question and answer.
Great, excellent. That's why we're doing this.
All right. So yes, born and raised in the United States. Went to university in Austin, UT Austin. So started my career in investment banking first. I was a finance major as well as studying Japanese. So that's a whole separate thing. As I started studying Japanese when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
So
did your middle school offer that?
No, actually, I started with self-study, and then I went to an after-school language study program because I was living with my family. I was in Los Angeles, so there's more opportunities.
So is that where you grew up? Like
Uh,
the early years, or is that
this is
another long
also a hard
story?
question. Yeah, but I do say California, just given that I was born there and I
Hmm.
lived there at many points during my life,
Hmm.
including those formative high school years. But moved around a lot with the family, but also
Uh-huh.
mostly in the South and West Coast. But
And both your parents American?
they are,
Okay.
and so we moved for basically either my dad's job or my
Hmm.
mom's job, depending on the time and the
Okay.
situation. But funny enough, I spent most of my years growing up, or I guess I could say the largest portion of them, which was first through seventh grade, living in Mobile, Alabama, so deep
Hmm.
south.
So how does a 12-year-old boy in Alabama decide to learn Japanese? I mean,
Well, that
that's
that is a good question.
I mean, I actually, for me, it's not that strange because I
Hmm.
was that kind of language nerd early on. I just loved, I learned English through listening to music
Oh,
and
cool,
and
nice.
translating song lyrics. And I
Oh,
was
perfect.
probably about that age, 12, 13, but still, that's quite
Right.
a step.
Yes. I would say I got my start through being interested in a lot of Japanese animation, the comic books,
Yeah.
the video games, a lot of stuff that other boys my age were interested in at the time, but I
Hmm.
just took it way further than anybody else.
Hmm.
So it was I was not content just to enjoy it kind of passively, just coming home from school and watching cartoons. It was like, okay, how do I start watching this in Japanese? How do I start,
Excellent.
getting deeper into it? And then
Yeah.
I had started my studies through, well, just a lot of things kind of coalesced in terms of my interest in Japan, but also I should point out importantly that my dad was strongly suggesting, let's say,
Hmm.
to find a hobby. And I took
Hmm.
that and I was like, I'm not really a
Yeah.
sports person. I love music, but I'm
Hmm.
not really that much into practicing instruments, so maybe a language.
Hmm.
And then I think my mom was working for a book selling company and they had a discount and she was like, do you or your sister want anything? And I looked through the catalog thing and I saw this book and cassette tape set for Japanese, and I was like, yeah, just get me that. And then that's kind of where it all started.
That's so wonderful. Oh.
Yeah, I did it 30 minutes every day for like 9 months, and then I
Mhm.
started taking. I did the whole course twice, and then I started taking classes in the after-school program,
Mhm.
working with tutors, immersion programs, speech contests. I took it very far.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I get that kind of obsessive love
right.
for languages completely. So that was the
Yeah,
start. So you knew at some
that
point
was the spark.
you
Yeah,
were going to go to Japan. You knew that.
that was definitely the plan. We took as a family trips and cruises, and I mean not a ton, but we did see other parts of the world. We went on like a 2-3 week trip
Mhm.
into Europe. We went down to Mexico, so I did get that in a bit of international experience, and every time it always quite impressed me. But then there was just something about Japan in particular. I never took the French or the German or the
Mhm.
Spanish classes at school. It was something about Japanese culture that really drew me in. I visited for the first time when I was 17 and did a 1 month trip of language study, sightseeing across multiple cities, and also doing some homestay with a big
Mhm.
group of high school students. And I just came back completely invigorated, just
Mhm.
ready to keep studying and trying to
Mhm.
figure out how to make Japan a more permanent part of my life. And it took a long time to get there. I tried to make that happen coming out of university. I got close a few times with a few potential internships or job offers, but it didn't happen. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this isn't the time for it. And I took some
Mhm.
advice that I got from one of those interviews. The interviewer, after telling me I didn't get the job, gave me some great advice to say, it's wonderful that you have this interest in Japan, that you speak Japanese, that you want to be there. But what you could do to really make it happen is to start your career in the US, get that
Mhm.
US based work experience, whatever, in that case, it was more of a finance type job, and then try to leverage that in Japan.
Mhm.
So I took that with me, took it back to the table, and decided indeed I would start in the US and focus on that in my senior year. And then some years down the road, a couple of years down the road, which I could get into in more detail, but basically worked initially in Charlotte, North Carolina, transferred to the San Francisco office, and then I changed jobs, and then I started my career properly, I would like to say, in product management, which I've done for the last 7 years. And the first company I worked for in that product manager role was a games company that had offices in Vancouver and Beijing. And so I didn't join the company expecting to have that opportunity. But about 8-9 months into the role, the product managers had a chance to go to either Vancouver or Beijing for a 3-month work deployment.
Okay.
And that was just opening
yes, please, take
the door.
me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was immediately, like, we all, I still remember getting called into this meeting. We're all sitting down watching the VP of the group talk through a bunch of slides, and it was like 40 minutes of an overview of the business and where things are headed, and talking about some of the issues that we're potentially seeing in the horizon, and getting to that last slide where it's like, now we need people to go. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not staying in San Francisco. We have got to take advantage of this opportunity.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, that sounds like an amazing opportunity. I mean, sound advice. I like that. Build something, get your experience, and elevate your college degree, and then take it further, and then say, I want to do this, and then say, hey, and I also speak another language, which I think is
exactly,
because very often that's what people do. They get the work experience and they become very good at what they're doing, but they lack the linguistic skills, and then that's where they fall short of that. And so tell me about that. What was that? That was 3 months in Beijing.
In Beijing. It was so incredible. I forgot to mention that I also had visited China before, because I had gone for 3 months study abroad in Singapore.
Okay, I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, I did the study abroad thing. I guess that was, that's an important experience as well. But I visited China for 2 weeks after that semester before I came back to the US for an internship. And it was a really, really hard trip because it was just me by myself speaking like 3 words of Chinese, trying to get around to I wasn't in the smallest cities, but I was getting outside of Beijing and Shanghai. And I went there and I just had an absolute blast. And it was totally different than the first time. I mean, of course, the country had developed. I had changed as a person too. But on top of that, I went within a work capacity. So I had the money to enjoy. I had the coworkers. I already had the built-in community. And approximately like halfway through that experience, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in, there was a meeting with each one of us individually. It was a group of 5 of us that went out there. And the person in operations talked to each one of us and said, how are things going? Is there anything we can help you with? What do you think about coming back? And I believe at the time I was the only one saying, yes, send me back. Definitely, 100%. I want to stay longer. Like my second week there, I was already studying Chinese. It was just like, maybe Japan wasn't the future, but China's the future. I was very flexible. I was willing to adjust to whatever opportunity was put in front of me to be able to be abroad. And that just shows the amount of passion that I had toward it. Although I must also say that cutting to the end, I got back to the US. I was fully intent on going back to China for at least another year. And then about a month after I got back, I got laid off. So that didn't work out, but it was that was a crushing experience for sure. Yeah. I saw that whole vision of my next year or years just disappear. But I took that opportunity to take stock of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to do with my life, I guess, and where I wanted to be, and thought, I'm not going to let this one company decide my future. And as everyone does, which I say that knowing that nobody does this, I went straight to Europe for 9 weeks. And while I was doing my Europe trip, I was taking interviews over Skype in Japan and China. So
fabulous.
I was making use of the time, let's say.
And sometimes it's exactly what you need to do to move forward. You need to be out of your comfort zone and out of your environment, and kind of, because sometimes you feel stuck where you are, and then I think being surrounded by different things will just kick your brain into a different mode. So that's great.
I think if anyone that's listening is wondering if it's for them or what they should do next if they're presented with such a scenario. A great thing to do is, so for me, I first took some interviews in San Francisco in the few weeks before I left, thinking I was getting nervous. I was, I have this drive to kind of jump back in and get that next job lined up. And I applied for a job through a friend, a friend of mine, acquaintance, I should say, and got to the final round, did the interview. And when I found out that I didn't get the job, I was relieved. And I was relieved because I really wanted to give it a shot to find something abroad. And that's what I thought about this. My idea was this trip around Europe was not only to see Europe, which was one of my dreams, but it also gave me that space to just focus on international positions, because I thought, I'm not going to apply for anything else in San Francisco when I'm in Europe. I mean, most people don't apply to jobs in Asia when they're in Europe, but I still thought this is my 9 weeks of kind of quote unquote freedom before I get back into the job search process in San Francisco, or if I wanted to move to another city in the United States. So I think just listening to your heart or whatever, but just going with that intuition of, I'm very thankful that didn't work out, because now I have the opportunity to search for that international role. I'm not perfect at listening to what these things tell me, but I can look back, and I've tried to become better at being able to identify those times in my life, and they become clearer. And now I can hear it much more clearly than I could back then. But I think that's worth considering, is like, okay, give yourself that time, give yourself that space, and don't feel like you have to jump in without exploring some options, because maybe you'll get the first job you apply to abroad, or it might take 50. I've gone through both routes. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard thing to do, to trust that process, and to trust yourself.
The faith is really tough.
I mean, I think everyone's been there at some point in their lives. So that's, and it's such great advice. Give it time. And regardless of what you do, it's just to give it time. And I'm not a very patient person, and
Me neither.
It's one of the hardest things to do, but it's so true. And I also, as I said earlier, it's being in a different environment will help you do that.
Yes.
And it's, again, this is very stereotypical, being outside of the US also helps, I think, because I feel the US is one of the most fast-paced, stressful environments. Sometimes, I mean, I feel that when I go and visit my friends and family in Germany, and I can feel I go there for vacation, or just to kind of to relax. But even with people working, my friends are working and then they meet me in the evening, I feel a slower pace. And I think that most countries in Europe are maybe slower pace than the US. Maybe that's just my observation, but I feel that's also helpful when you do want to take a step back and not be in the middle of the rat race.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think because I've always been, as you might get a sense of, sort of driven and single-minded and competitive, or whatever the right words are, I've moved myself into a position, like now jumping way forward, but now sitting here in Portugal, where things go slowly. And I've had to adjust, and because I wanted to also, I searched for that. And I'm still struggling with it at times. Sometimes I'm like, where's the dang bus? Like this thing is not showing up for like an hour now. I am going crazy here, but I've got to like take a deep breath, enjoy the slow pace. And I've noticed that a lot of the friends I've made abroad, definitely here in Europe, even Americans that moved here, sometimes I tend to still have that high, fast-paced mentality that that I've always had, I guess, since I was young, but especially working in places like in finance, working in San Francisco. So it's been a long adjustment process for me, and it's still in process, because I have to get it out of myself a little bit.
But isn't it also a great combination if you find the balance because that's also what a lot of Europeans appreciate, that the drive and the yes, we can get it done attitude, because
Right.
that's sometimes lacking. I always think it's the ideal combination.
Mm. Yeah,
um,
I've found that I found ways to make it work well,
mhm.
and in a corporate environment, it really depends on the soul of the company. Is it more European? Is it more American
Yeah.
or more Asian or whatever?
Hmm.
And that's can be hard to figure out from the outside, and you kind
Yeah.
of have to work there a little while to figure out, are they actually pushing? Is it really moving forward, or is
Hmm.
it taking a more relaxed approach? And I just have had to learn to change myself a bit to fit that, because if I'm pushing too hard, then it's going to rub people the wrong way. And so I've had a lot of, learning lessons along the way.
But then also it's because you have lived in all those different places that you've had the opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
learn. Because so many times people get sent on an assignment and they've never experienced another culture, and then they just assume that they just bring all that what they know with
Right.
them,
Right.
and then doesn't. And then there's
Oh
clashes,
yeah.
and it's. I always think. I mean, it would be an amazing thing. Gosh, I think I say this in every single interview. If everybody was given the opportunity to spend a
Mm-hmm.
year in another country, or at least one other
Yeah.
country after school, say, just to experience it and not just read about it, but do it, I think it would change
Mm.
people and work culture and all that so much.
I agree.
So
I agree.
let's jump back. So you were in Europe and you're applying to all these jobs.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah. So it was a lot of early mornings, late nights, managing the moving around Europe. I think I went to, like, I'm this itinerary driven person, which I've tried to also pull back on a bit, but you get a sense of it. But I was going, I don't know, to 19 cities in 9 weeks, and there was so much I wanted to see. And especially early on back in those days, I had this, I think a lot of people do, they have this idea like, this is my chance. I'm not going to see any of this stuff again,
Mm-hmm.
even though I figured I would be able to get there again at some point, whether for a long term in terms of living or not. But, it just was this mentality of, I have to see all of Western Europe in one go. And while I was doing that, I was taking these interviews, doing the take-home assignments, if you want to call them that, trying to connect with people on Skype in shoddy, cafe Wi-Fi or hostel Wi-Fi. So in the end, I had my final interview for a job in Japan the day that I was going back to the US, and I found out a few weeks later that I got it. And a few months after that, with the visa application and everything else, I was off to Japan. So I went to Tokyo in 2014, and I ended up staying there for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Which
And
we can talk more about.
a dream come true. Yeah, did you kind of feel like, yes, this is what I
Yes.
worked for, and I made it. My 12-year-old self is so happy inside.
Yes. 100 or more, 110%.
Uh-huh.
It was truly a dream come true. And yeah, just kind of transporting myself mentally back to that time. Just even having been to Tokyo a few times, I also visited with a friend for another month when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd been to a lot of places in Japan already, but I left that trip thinking, I don't want to come back to Japan until I'm living here, because I'd already seen so much of it. And I
Yeah.
knew with eventually going to Singapore and everything, that there was so much more of the world to see. But I thought, if I come back to Japan, it's to live here and to get off the plane, to get off the train,
Mm-hmm.
to go into downtown Shibuya in Tokyo and see the big screens and see the intersection, the famous intersection, was just like, man, I've arrived. This is finally happening. And yeah, it was a dream come true. And I feel fortunate and proud of the fact that I feel like I really took advantage of that time in terms of just traveling a lot, seeing a lot around the city, going out, lots of late nights, lots of, everything that I could try to do. Yeah, there's always more that you can do, but I feel like I made a good use of that time that I was there. It ended up being only 2 years, and then probably your listeners are like, well, if that was your dream, why did you stay 2 years? the reason is because I got this job, which was great. And the first year it was fantastic. And then I was basically part of a 2-person team inside the company. We were managing I didn't say the company, so it's ASICS or ASICS, depending on where you're from, the sportswear company. In Japanese, it's Ashiksu, but in the US, I always said ASICS. And there, I was working on a 2-person team on a digital product called My ASICS, which was helping people improve their running performance in marathons. And it was fantastic for the first year. And then after 1 year, the product manager that was on the team left, and now it was just me. And that was less fun. More people were leaving. There was some not great morale in the team overall. And then something really important in that role happened, which was that ASICS acquired a company in Boston called Runkeeper. And that's great for the company, but it wasn't so great for me, because it went from me being on a 1-man team for this global product that was not doing amazing, but it was what it was, to having 40 people in Boston working on a much better, much more used product. And so either I could move to Boston, or I could do something totally different at the company, which is probably a theme that will develop in this conversation, is that I always went after the opportunities that helped me to progress my career. So not only did I not want to go back to the US, but I didn't want to stay and just do a whatever job. I wanted to keep doing my product management or my marketing job. And as a result, I looked all over Tokyo for other opportunities. I took tons of interviews, and I could not find the next role that fit for me and that I fit for them, I guess. And then I started opening my mind to Berlin, and basically I had a great experience there on my 9-week trip. I really remembered Berlin in my head as this like incredible place that I want to experience and dig into more. And I started networking, or within my network, I started sort of reaching out to people. And long story that I've already said, but to finish it shortly, I managed to get an offer before I left Tokyo from the first company I applied to in Berlin. And that was after something like 50 applications in Japan. So just to give you a sense of like many, many months of applying in Japan and not finding it, and then you get the first job you applied to in Berlin, the universe, I feel, was telling me something, and I decided to jump for that.
But it sounds like you were very much in touch with your intuition, and that sense of, I really know that I'm not going to be happy with just any job, and there is that balance between I'm in my dream place, but there's so much else to discover. And I mean, that's a very clear-minded view, really, to have that and then go for it. That's impressive. And I think a lot of people, well, yeah, because a lot of people would be thinking like, we're here now, and it's moving is stressful, and getting to know a place and all that, and having the sense of starting again. Starting again is difficult. It's exciting, but it's very, it's exhausting. And I think a lot of people just don't like that, or just kind of are scared of jumping into the unknown again.
I've noticed that as well with many people in Japan or in other countries, where there's some idea of maybe moving to somewhere else, or just sort of considering it. And of course, people that are in their home countries, this goes for even more so. And for one reason or another, of course, some people move sometimes, but I think I just had a much more open sense of, the world is still out there. And even though this was my goal and my dream, and I'm not going to say that I didn't apply for some jobs that I kind of knew already weren't going to be a great fit, but I also decided, okay, I always could have taught English, for example. I could have tried my hand at translation. I mean, my Japanese was good enough, but ultimately I knew it wouldn't have been satisfying. And I think one of the key learnings I've made over the years, maybe you have as well, but when you really think about what you'll be doing when you're living somewhere, and not just living in your head where it's like, oh, Japan with these, beautiful places and all this stuff to see and cool people, and that's all fantastic. But if you're actually working day in, day out, a full-time job, and in Japan, I'm not saying the job that I had was crazy hours. It wasn't, but it could be. And all of that, and also being like potentially in some of those jobs, the only foreigner in a otherwise completely Japanese environment, as much as it might sound great to improve my Japanese, or hey, you get the authentic experience, that also didn't really appeal to me that much. The Japanese work culture in its own way is a challenge.
And I mean, there's this life in general, when you you get up in the morning, you go to work and you come home, and it's the same anywhere. And you don't necessarily have all that time to explore places. I mean, when we moved to the US, everyone was like, "Oh, have you been here?" And like, well, hang on, we actually live here. We're not on a break. We did try and explore and see a lot of places, but it's, at the end of the day, your daily life is what it is anywhere, regardless of where you are. So you have to make sure that you do something that fulfills you.
Yeah, and I think then you have to look a little bit at, there's always pros and cons. There's always benefits and drawbacks, and there's no perfect place. And as a result, you also have to balance or take into account the average quality of life. And I think that that's what people should be striving for. I mean, of course, if you love living somewhere and it's worth the struggle, then by all means, if that's what makes you happy. But I've at least gone more toward quality of life. So part of that is more Western work environments, moving into Europe, also much more vacation time than you'd ever get in Japan. I was going to
say that's one of the big perks of working in Germany, for sure.
Oh yeah. So all of that, along with thinking about in my career, wanting to stay in that product management career at the time, I also thought I want to be able to continue doing this in English in a situation where I can speak my mind. And being in Japan, and not all of those roles, some of those were foreign-owned companies and things like that, but in a lot of those situations, I think not only would I have struggled with the Japanese despite my fluency, just dealing with those business concepts, cultural, and the hierarchy and the cultural elements, but on top of that, just in Japanese language, you really have to beat around the bush. And I don't think that actually aligns with me, I guess. And so all of that stuff just led me to think, okay, I've given this a seriously fair shot to try to find the next job. And I don't want to stick around and see my contract not be renewed, or stick around and have to do something I'm not excited about. So let me look at other options. And that's how it all kind of came together in my head.
And then you came to Berlin.
I did. I jumped on a plane, and I'd given notice at my company in Japan. And my plan was literally from that final day, I had timed it just right, so that, because basically my company was also guaranteeing the apartment and helping in Japan to help pay for some of it. But as soon as I quit the company, I had 30 days until I had to get out of the flat. And so I just timed it perfectly to where my plan was to go to Germany for 6 weeks, 4 weeks in Berlin to interview, network, see what I could find. And then 2 weeks to go to Oktoberfest with friends and things like that. As you do.
As you do.
And then, I think after I gave notice, but before I left on the flight, I got the offer from this first company I'd reached out to. The rest of them were waiting for me to come to have an in-person interview, but I was like, okay, let's do that. And I just turned a round trip into a one-way, and that was pretty much it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There is something to be said for those one-way tickets and one-way journeys. It's quite a different feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when I had approximately 2 weeks I was going to put stuff in storage. Like I said, I had to move out anyway, but suddenly it was a fire sale. So
yeah, to a lot of people that sounds very daunting in terms of moving and the logistics and all that. It's very stressful, but also that can all be done. That's really you have 2 weeks. Okay, you can make it work. You can.
Yeah, and even if you can't get top dollar for your used furniture, and I think it's important for people, your listeners, but just people in general, to recognize when they move abroad, think of it as an investment, because it's going to cost money. Of course, if you get the red carpet rolled out for you with a job and so on, that's amazing. But for everybody else, it is an investment. And of course, if you get a job, try as much as you can to get them to cover this or that and to throw in extra things.
Yeah, that's a really,
negotiation,
really good, really good tip. I mean, we've done it both ways. We've done it on company cost but also on our own dime. And
yeah. And if that's what you want, then there's so much that we deal with, right? Especially at least for me as an American citizen now, having to deal with filing taxes every year, even when I'm abroad. I mean, there's just a lot of, and of course, immigration and then hiring an immigration lawyer. It's not a cheap experience to live abroad, but not to scare people away, just to give the honest, at least in my opinion, the honest truth. And so, of course, come prepared with the proper finances, but I tend to get stressed out about it, but I'm trying not to, because I recognize this is leading me toward the life that I want. And that's worth, as you said, money on.
It's an investment. It's an investment in yourself.
Yeah.
And life in general is cheap, regardless of where you are. And there's always unforeseen things.
Yes.
Everything comes at a price, but that anything that's helping you in what you want to do and who you want to be, I think is worth any expense.
Yes.
And often it means also that your financial situation changes. So you might be living in a big house in one country and then move into a 1-bedroom apartment in the next.
Yeah.
It can be very non-linear.
Yeah.
Living in other places definitely changes your perspective on that, on what is right and important for you.
Yeah, I think that's just to give an important, although I guess I've been kind of embarrassed about it in the past, but I'm just trying to be real with it now. But an honest truth from my experience is, if you look at my career, so I started as an investment banking analyst, then I went into product management in San Francisco, then in Tokyo, then in Berlin, then in Porto. So my salary has consistently been on the decline. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm now making more money than I ever was. But these are the decisions that you have to make and priorities that you have to fit into your life. And I'm, being totally honest, there are days where I'm like, wait, why did I do that again? I mean,
you could have done it very differently.
I would also point out, though, that I'm thankful that I did start, once again, going back to that first piece of advice, that I did start in the US, working there, indeed, in some professional fields where I was able to, and I mean, I made savings. I saved. I could have spent it. I chose to save it. But I was also in a fortunate position where I was making more than I was spending. And that has helped me to also at least have that as a safety net, as opposed to always doing, instead of going straight from university into a job that maybe doesn't pay so well or this or that can be harder to come back from or to build on in your career if you are focused on staying abroad. So just something for people to keep in mind.
Let's talk a little bit about your time in Berlin. Did you speak any German when you went to Berlin?
No, and I'll be honest, I don't speak much still. I shouldn't say anymore, but I never really.
How long were you there?
I was there for 3 years, and I didn't really take any lessons after the first handful of months. I mean, just being completely honest. I'm not saying that was the right choice, but I also knew in the back of my mind, but I kind of thought, this is my thinking literally going into Berlin, was I studied Japanese since I was 12, and I studied it for over a year, over 10 years. I mean, almost 15 at that time, I guess. And I lived in Japan for 2 years. Therefore, for me to be quote unquote successful in this Berlin experience was to be in Berlin greater than 2 years. And that was all that I had in my head, was like, how can I kind of do more than 2 years in one country? And I think when I came out of so many tough years, I mean, fun and passionate, but tough years of learning Japanese, then it becomes much harder to re-engage with a new language, especially if you don't have that feeling like this is the future. It was different for me a little bit for some reason, I guess you could say, with China and Chinese, because I thought maybe this is the future. And when I was there, it was also something where I really felt like I needed to learn it. And part of the reason I went to Berlin is because I knew there were English speaking jobs and lots of other expats. So I think those were some factors that played a role in my relative disinterest in spending a lot of time studying German.
And it's so tough learning new languages as you get older, and you do realize, because I used to be, I just pick it up and taught myself Spanish, the basics, and now I'm actually trying to learn Portuguese right now. Nice. Because actually Portugal is on our list of
great
possible future post fast-paced American work life.
Right.
We kind of like to look into a slower pace of life and something closer to home, family, and
sure.
But not necessarily Germany or the UK. So I've just started learning Portuguese. I got the Babbel app. My goodness, it's so hard. And I do have French and Spanish too, but rusty, but they're there. But I still. Oh, but my brain it's just so difficult. So I kind of feel like
it's a very hard language.
I need to find a native speaker. That's what I need to do.
I've also been, I could say, a little disappointed, or I don't know, frustrated by how difficult Portuguese ends up being. And I actually find it a little bit easier to follow and listen to Brazilian Portuguese, and that's the difference. Is also it's much more. I believe it's much more kind of condensed and connected. The sound of continental European Portuguese, and it's. I've made more of an effort, and my wife as well. We've made more of an effort, or she speaks German very well, I should say. So not on that front, but just like we both made an effort to try to indeed pick up Portuguese. And for me, it's more, I have a longer term perspective here than I did when I went to Germany at that time. So we've made an effort.
Yeah. So how did you end up in Porto? So you said you were in Berlin for 3 years.
Right. So the way that it kind of came together was, let's see. So I met my wife when I was living in Berlin. And soon after that, we started talking about if there were something next, what that would be. And I guess that's a conversation a lot of expat couples or families have. And we arrived at the idea of Portugal. My wife had a great impression of Portugal, but had never been there. And I visited at the end of that Europe trip in 2014. And I had a great memory of the time there. Like nothing too specific. I could remember the Francesinha, maybe if your listeners don't know, it's like a very Portuguese sandwich covered in sauce and cheese. And I just remembered that. I remembered the bridges, these incredible bridges in Porto and Lisbon.
And Lisbon has so much of San Francisco, doesn't it?
It does. It really feels just like San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, not 100%, but in so many ways that you just get this flash of it here or there. And we decided to take a 1-week trip in October of 2018, and we totally loved it. We came back thinking, okay, we need to try to figure out how we can move there. And it happened eventually in such a way that I was thinking about trying to see if I could work remotely for the company I was working for in Berlin. But again, I got laid off. I got laid off many times in my career, and I'm trying to be more open about that and just the challenges of, working in tech, and especially in an international context at times. But that happened to me. I found out that would be happening in April of 2019, and then I could sort of pick the end date. Basically, they stopped investing in the game that I was working on. So I decided to leave in the end of June. And we had kind of a whirlwind couple months, but basically I started applying to jobs all over Europe and other cities, other countries. We were kind of feeling at the time like Berlin we'd done our Berlin time.
So is your wife American also?
So that's the other funny thing. I was like, I should probably explain this too. So we met in Berlin, but she's Japanese, and
Okay.
I had my Japan goal in my head from when I was young, and hers was Germany. So she speaks German very well. She lived there for 5 years across Frankfurt and Berlin, did all kinds of different jobs. And so her program, she was doing a baking program, an Ausbildung program in Berlin, and that was wrapping up in August. So the timing was good for us to make a life change if we could find something. And so I applied in many different cities, of course, Porto and Lisbon, Barcelona, Tallinn in Estonia, Copenhagen, Amsterdam. I applied to a lot of jobs there. And this is the one the one that worked out, and the one that made the most sense was here in Porto. And I'm super happy, super thankful that it did work out. And we moved here a year ago. It still feels great, and still one thing that's the wanderlust for me, it always comes back, and it tends to come after year one. And the reason for that is the first year is all fresh, and then you're settled. It takes a year for you to settle, so it feels great on that level. But then you start seeing the same stuff again the second year, and it's a little bit less interesting than it was the first year. And of course, I just got through that first year, but I still feel very positive and energized about living here. So far, it looks good.
Yeah, it does take a while.
It's all the moving to the new place, the new apartment, getting settled with furniture, immigration stuff. Then you've got getting settled into your new job if you're going to be working there, making friends, which I don't mean just a friend at the pub. I'm talking about real friends. Sorry, but
and usually it's, unless you're really lucky and you just hit it off with someone right away, it takes sometimes years, and sometimes even a year isn't long enough to really get there. And it's, people underestimate that, I think.
I think so too. I even do. I've done it so many times, and yet I'm like, yeah, it takes a year, right?
You have to absolutely remind yourself, and those deep dark moments when you regret everything and you doubt everything, and then you have to kind of come back to that and say, no, it's just does take a while, and as you get older, it's just harder. I think it's just.
It is, and I think I was much more willing, like coming from Japan. Just, I was not married. I didn't have any pets or anything. I had some friends, but there was nothing really tying me to Japan. Definitely not the job at that point. And I was just willing to really just be like, okay, I took a long time to get to that decision, but when I decided to think about other places and just think about what's next, then it was like, okay, so now I start applying. Oh, hey, I got a job. Okay, bye guys, and I'm not that way anymore. And it was a big move, but I really want to stay here I hope, knock on wood, that I'll be here for a long time.
And it does change once it's not just you. And it's so, and then especially then with a cross-cultural relationship as well, where it's like you are not with someone in their country, you are outside of both your countries, and then that it's, and people settle in at different paces, and it just makes it more difficult. And then decisions become just harder and harder. So as great as it is, and as interesting, and sometimes being in a relationship where the other person is more adventurous maybe, or says, hey, let's try this, will be amazing. But it's added complications, definitely.
I think a big thing that worked, and has worked so far in our relationship with my wife, is that, as I mentioned, we met each other both in a third country. We were both outside of our home countries, and
you were on neutral ground.
Yeah, we were neutrally uncomfortable or something, mutually uncomfortable. And I think I think that's fantastic, because I, had a relationship, for example, in Japan, and by the time the Berlin situation came up, we both just kind of, she wanted to stay there, I wanted to move on, and that was what it was. And, that is what it is. But I think it's really key that, at least for us, that it worked out in such a way that now we're comfortable together in the world, and not necessarily in our home countries. I mean, doesn't mean we won't go back someday, you never know, but
you never know. But it's, I mean, this is one reason why we we're not even really seriously considering living in either the UK or Germany at this point. We like the idea of a place there maybe to visit and to kind of pop in and out, but to live, I think we're both automatically just feel like we want something neutral. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's so interesting.
It's equally fun, hopefully fun, and I guess you could say, like, no one has the home court advantage. I think that's a good thing too, because
It
of
feels
course
more equal.
yeah,
Definitely feels more equal. You can't blame, you have a bad day, you can't blame it on your partner.
right, right. Or your people, or
yes,
your language, or your culture, or
yeah, really, absolutely. So you said you both felt equally uncomfortable together in Berlin. Let's so now we've come from the States via Asia and Berlin, then to Porto, and along the way, can you think of any things that you really didn't expect, like something that you would just, because I mean you sound like someone who really does their research and you learn and you're very open-minded and all that, but was there anything along the way that really just came out of the blue?
That's a good question. Maybe many people would answer that, I would think, if they've had experience in Japan with something from Japan. And while I had many interesting and maybe even crazy experiences there, on the other hand, I had been studying Japanese and studying Japanese culture for so long that nothing comes to mind that really shocked me or surprised me, took me off guard there too much. But I think what surprised me most, and I recognize I'll have to tread lightly given your background, but I'm going to speak on some German stuff.
Oh,
if that's
go
all right.
for it. Believe me, I lived in the UK for 13 years. I've heard everything about the Germans you can possibly imagine.
I guess that gives you some good self-reflection, or like whatever the right word is, but it gives you some chance to be like, oh, yeah, maybe they're right, or maybe they're wrong. But so for me, I think the biggest, most surprising thing out of the gate was coming from Japan into Germany, because when I was in Japan and I told people, my friends, my Japanese friends even, that I was moving to Germany, they would always say something like, yes, Germans and Japanese are very similar. They're just, they're just the same. And I always ask them, how so? Because so the context is, of course, I had visited Berlin. I loved it for a 3-day trip, right? But I didn't really think much more about it than that. I mean, my thought process was, this is a very, very cool city. I really want to dig under the surface a little bit. I felt like I just got that tourist impression. And also, okay, English-speaking jobs in the middle of Europe, and I can travel a lot, and yeah, great. There's lots of other foreigners there. Cool. That was my thinking. It wasn't something that was driving me to Germany, or I hadn't studied German other than that. So when I asked them, these Japanese friends, what do you think about Germany that's the same? They would just think for a second and they'd say, well, Germans and Japanese both love to drink beer. And that was like, okay, man, can you give me something else? Because I'm pretty sure everybody in most countries around the world, unless it's legally not allowed,
sign up
everyone
to that.
loves to drink some beer. And then they would say, so I'd ask them to go a little deeper if they had anything, and they would think for a longer time. And they would say, yeah, it's very rule-based, and people follow the rules and stuff like that. So I had that sort of insight, and I think that's true. What surprised me more was recognizing the truth in that, but at the same time, I went from Japan, where there are tons of rules, regulations, processes. Nobody can step out of line on that stuff. You can't. The thing that got a lot of people there was, you go to Starbucks in Japan, and you can't ask them to make it like you would in America. Like, if it's not on the menu, you're not going to get it. They're like, have to ask a manager, and the manager's going to say no. So that's the Japanese Starbucks experience, at least from what I recall. But when I went to Germany, I immediately realized that indeed people do follow the rules, but they're not kind about it. And in Japan, as people who
Mm-hmm.
maybe have an impression of Japan or have traveled there, they at least get a sense of Japanese people tend to try to be helpful, try
Mm.
to point you in the right direction, be friendly, be polite. Of course, then you can get in the question of, are they really that way deep down once you get past the
Mm-hmm.
surface impression? But
That's the Germans' favorite statement about people anyway. It's like how they're just shallow. It's just shallow. It's just nothing underneath.
yeah, and I've
But
heard
then
about Americans a lot here in Europe.
you
But
mentioned this earlier where you said that Japanese are so you can't say things straight out and
mhm,
you have to kind of to try and say something, it's almost like you have to say the opposite and to kind of come
mhm,
a different way and all that. And that's,
right.
to me, is the total opposite to Germans.
Yeah, I was not prepared for it. I came from one of the politest, let's say
Yeah.
generically, stereotypically, one of the
Mm-hmm.
politest countries, to Berlin, which I'm not saying it's one of the rudest countries, but it's the rudest country or place I've ever spent a lot of time in. I mean, just being totally honest. And
Mm-hmm.
that stark contrast
Mm-hmm.
was like shocking, because it's not like I went from the US to Japan and then I went from the US to Germany.
Mm.
I went like 180
One extreme.
degrees.
Yeah.
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 And I really had to develop thicker skin in
Yeah.
Germany. And it wasn't fun and it wasn't easy. I'm also kind of thankful for it in the end, because I probably needed that. And I'm still working on it. But I think this was the thing that I just remember being
Yeah.
so surprised about. And I had that moment in the first months after many of these kind of interactions in Germany where I was like, do I really want this? I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't even like think about it before I got there, and then it was just in my face. So
I get that so much, and that is one of the reasons I don't live in Germany. I have to, I've said it, it's out. I really appreciate the directness and the honesty that people have and all that. There's something to be said for that, and people don't bullshit and I don't small talk. There is something great about that, but it can also be absolutely crushing. And when you, especially when you're trying to do something and you're not completely certain that you're doing the right thing, and then someone just goes and says no, yeah, it can be soul crushing, and you really have to learn to deal with it. So when you said earlier that you have to tread more carefully with the Japanese and not be so direct, I thought
right.
actually the English are a lot more similar to the Japanese in that where you have
Mhm.
to, they don't say things
Right.
right out. And I had to learn that when I left Germany and moved to the UK.
Mm.
That
Mm.
was my biggest experience, biggest learning curve was how do I get to where I want to be without asking
Mm.
straight out, but actually
Mhm.
finding a more polite and more roundabout way of doing so, and not, and you know,
Right.
so, and I think ever since then I've struggled even more, and going back to Germany,
Mm.
I
Mm.
just, it's jarring sometimes, and again sometimes
Yeah.
I miss it. Sometimes I miss it, especially living in the US, where it can be very bland, and people are very trying to be very generic and just not
Mm. Mm.
offensive, and try to go out of their way to be politically correct and all that. And sometimes you just want to go, just tell me how it is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but on the whole, I absolutely get that. And coming from Japan, must have been, yeah, I can only
Yeah.
imagine. And for your wife as well, for your
Yeah.
wife, that must have been,
I guess she was used to it coming, like,
having
or
studied
rather
it.
having
Mm-hmm.
studied it, been there for a long time, but it's not something that she appreciated about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mean, that's at least one of the key things that made us eventually decide that this is probably
Mm-hmm.
not the right spot for us. And that's the thing too, is of course I started, thankfully, I'm grateful to have started in Japan, which was my dream. And then I thought, Berlin's really cool. Let's go over there. Big city, lots of stuff happening. Awesome. And each time, which part of it was going from, so to say it more fully, going from Japan, it was like, I want more vacation days. I want a
Mm-hmm.
better kind of work situation, even though my balance was fine for what it was in Japan. So let's go to Europe, Berlin. That's where it's at. Let's go. And then I had the few years there, and based on those experiences and
Mm-hmm.
impressions of European and German culture, okay, maybe Portugal. So it's this process of
Mm-hmm.
adjusting along the way. And I just wanted to say that because I think it's important for people to realize they don't have to have the whole plan at the start. I mean, give it a good shot to figure out where do you want to live, to try out, and give it a good go. Like we said, at least a year, if not more, if you can. But don't think, okay, I've moved to my country and now I'm quote unquote stuck here, or don't get. But at least that's my impression, or how I've tried to do it, is just learn what you liked, what you didn't like, and try to go more toward that. And that goes toward also increasing that average level of life quality.
Yeah. So you're talking about life quality, and what do you do now in Porto? What is your
Yes, good question. What I love here is that I do live in the Porto area, but I live in a small city called Matosinhos, which is connected by metro, but is on the coast. I mean, Porto is as well, but this is more like a little beach town.
Do you surf?
I have started surfing. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm any good at it, but I've started. And that's the thing, was like, I saw all these people doing it, so let's give it a shot,
Yeah.
So I think just being again, going from the mega metropolis of Beijing to Tokyo, and then Berlin is huge as well. And now going completely the opposite direction to small, comfortable, local, little mom and pop shops everywhere, walking on the sand, walking around the beach. And there's not a ton going on. Of course, I can go downtown in 30, 40 minutes, which I do, once a week or whatever. But this slow pace of life, I was a little concerned at first because it's such a big difference, but it's a great energy here. There's a great vibe and I really love it. And so I'm trying to dig more into that, kind of, once again, changing my style of the fast paced. I can never break it fully, but this is part of
and
me.
How has it impacted your career? And what's your kind of main focus now? And has that changed from what it was a few years ago?
I did start. Well, I worked here in a senior product manager role at a company here. It's actually a German company, but they had a subsidiary here. The team was fully based here. And as you've gotten a sense of, a theme in my career is I got laid off in October. So I've always been doing this Expat Empire business, which is essentially focused on helping to inspire people to move abroad and showing them how to do it. And that's been going on in the background, like as a side project, for 2.5 years. And now that I've had my goal, even when I was in Berlin, was first, I was hoping to work remotely for that company and move to Portugal. That didn't end up working out. But my idea was that once I was in Portugal, settled, set up, putting away some more money with the cost of living difference as well, eventually I would quit that job, or it would run its course. And then I would work on Expat Empire. So now that I've come here, did that job for a year, the funding got cut with this COVID situation, laid off more than half the staff, then it's like, okay, I want to now fully focus on Expat Empire. So to answer your question more directly, I have tried to indeed keep with my product management career so far, but it has also, like, these different experiences and my drive and passion for living abroad and helping other people to do that has also informed my career, and that's what I'm trying to do now. And I think Portugal is has a pretty good cost of living. It's a good business environment. Lots of people are moving here. Not that I'm just helping only people moving to Portugal, but all of that put together, and just this life where we really like living this slow pace of life, and we can do these. And my wife's doing a little business of her own, so we're doing this stuff from our apartment, and I just, this is much more in line with what I wanted, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. And talking about your Expat Empire, I feel, there's such a need for people like you to use their experience and advice and all that, because people will be moving abroad and even more, I think, in future, and with local constraints, and just, I think people in general, there is in the younger generation too, there's a big kind of drive to experiencing different cultures in different countries. And think the more help and advice you can get before you go, the better and the more successful it's going to be.
Yeah, that's my thinking as well. Is I had worked I had studied or researched, for example, so much to try to get to Japan. I did all that on my own. And I couldn't find anybody to help me. I couldn't find a book. I couldn't find a good resource in any one place. And I'm not saying that I'll necessarily succeed at being the one-stop shop for all your knowledge and data and relocation service needs, but just my first step was writing a book called Passport to Working in Japan, which condensed and compiled all of that information, all that knowledge, and all the research I had done and the people I met and the network that I built into one book to help people get to Japan, because that was so close to my heart, right? And then added on the podcast, added on blog post, meetup event here in Porto, and hopefully more cities in the future. But then on top of that, indeed, a personalized, individualized consulting service, set of services to help people to really, starting from the very beginning of their planning stages, to make those moves. So utilizing my knowledge and experience, my research, as well as the network that I've built, on top of this idea that it's not just people who are moving abroad with a career already in hand, or not people that, like you said, there's going to be more and more people, young people, trying to move abroad and remote work, digital nomad, or moving to a country with maybe more flexible immigration policy. And I just want Expat Empire to be that company, that entity that helps people to make those moves and is a key contact point in that whole process.
Yeah, I like that. And I like to just raise awareness as well, that I feel like it's changed a lot over the last few years. I don't even want to say 10 years, but the last 5 years, definitely. There's more awareness that we actually need people like you. I didn't even know I needed help, or with hindsight, you always think, oh my goodness, this could have been so much easier had I asked someone, or had I known to ask someone. And I feel that's changing. And I just, I really like to see that trend to appreciating that kind of service.
And I'm glad to hear it. And I think the awareness is the thing that we, like, as an industry, need to get over at the first step. But what I find funny is that the longer that I've done this, the more moves that I've done, the more willing I am to pay for help. And this is hard. It's hard to explain to someone, right? Because they're like, I think I could do it on my own. I'll be fine. No, that's a little too pricey, even though I think the prices are reasonable. But then if you talk to people that have moved before, then they're just like, oh yeah, definitely sign me up for that. Oh yes, I need that. This is way too much work. I'm going to lose hair from that.
And sometimes it takes a bad experience for you to realize that, and then it changes perspective completely. Even if even something simple, like, I mean, we've the first time we moved back to the UK from the States, and we moved our dog, and I don't need a service. I'm going to do it all myself, And then the second time we moved back, we're like, I am going to throw money at this. And it was such an amazing experience. And ultimately, we ended up not paying that much more. Hiring someone to take care of everything. And now my attitude towards that has completely changed. And for myself as well. It's just, it's an investment. And I mean, that's, maybe a bad example, but anything that can help you in your personal journey. And I'm really just reiterating what you said earlier. Anything like that is an investment in yourself, and ultimately an investment that's going to be worth it.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the reason I've started this podcast, and showcasing people's stories and experiences. The goal is really to paint a more realistic picture. People just listen to these stories and think, oh, this is really, really difficult. So
I think that's the key. Is it's easy in a way to highlight the wonderful, as you see on Instagram or any of these sites and social media, like beautiful places, wonderful beaches, cool people, nightlife, this, that, and the other. But once you dig a little bit beneath the surface, you realize, like, indeed, that this is a hard road. And I mean, I'm fortunate and grateful and thankful for what I've been able to do in my career. But I hope, in a way, I hope that my interview also highlights how really hard it's been, and with quitting jobs, with changing countries, with getting laid off, and just trying to be more, ultimately as open and honest about it, and give people the honest feedback so they know what to expect, and indeed have more success in the end.
Great. I realized the time. I guess we could just keep talking and talking, but I like to finish my episodes always with a little personal thing.
Sure.
Is there anything you do that, having lived in all those different places and experienced the cultures, and they kind of become part of you and your persona and your, more or less, they've influenced you? Is there anything that you do, that you cook or bake, or a tradition that you follow, that you've taken with you and that you dig out from time to time when you want to feel that connection to a place that you miss?
Yeah, I think a good example is that my wife and I really wanted to have a bathtub in the new apartment when we moved here to Portugal. And the reason for that is to put the water in there really hot and do it like a Japanese bath, which is, we're doing our best to imitate it, but we really miss the onsen in Japan, the bathhouse. And we're doing our version of it. But when we went to Japan in 2019, we made a point of booking the hotel in Tokyo that had an onsen, because we just went in the morning, we went at night, we just like totally made sure to go at every opportunity, because there's something about it that's totally different than the German sauna or European saunas in general, which is, those tend to be, well, you're not sort of sitting in a tub of water, you're just in like a sweat lodge or this or that. It's not really like the Japanese one is just, if your listeners don't know, you basically put on the shampoo, soap outside. You do that in a separate area, and then you walk in cleaned into the tub, or the onsen, not really tub. Now it's a tub for us. And you just sit there and you just feel amazing. And we really miss that. And so for us, it was like, okay, can we get the tub to be able to make our version of that? And we're kind of as close as we can get, but it's never going to take the place of the real thing. But that's what we do.
But that's nice. It's because it's not just one little thing, but it's a ritual. It's the whole ritual that comes with it. No,
you're right. Yeah,
I love that. That sounds really nice. What a great idea. So that was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, David. And
thank you.
So where can people find you? We talked about Expat Empire. What
exactly. Yes, I'd love if your listeners, if they're interested in what I'm up to come to expatempire.com. So there they can sign up for the newsletter, get my recent ebook release of top 10 tips for moving abroad, which is the last 6-7 years of my life packed into a good 19-page PDF. So definitely check that out. And then for anyone who's interested in thinking about their next steps and trying to figure out what they want to do, where they want to go, and how to make it happen, feel free to also drop us a message on the website, and we can schedule a free 30-minute consulting call to talk through your plans, give us some, give advice from our side, and figure out where some services or help might be, able to support you, as we talked about earlier.
Sounds great. And once you've written that book about moving to Portugal, I'm going to probably be ready to move there. So
okay,
we'll be in touch.
It's on the list of to-dos, definitely.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yes.
So yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So that was my conversation with David. I told you he was full of amazing insights and advice, and I hope you found something that resonated with you and your own goals and plans. I really appreciated his honesty, and you could tell how much he's reflected on his own experiences and how he's very aware of things like intuition and patience and all that, and how important it is for your own journey. Make sure you check out his website for more information. And yeah, that's it from me for today. Take care and see you next time.